Hey, Jody here. I'm doing some practicing on socket welds today. Trying to get my hand back into walking the cup. Thought I'd bring you along with me. Let's do it. Since it's been such a long time since I've done socket welds, I decided to put one up in the positioner before kneeling down and getting underneath one. So this is a 3-pass weld here, and I'll link it up right about here if you want to see that separate video. I was using 309 filler here, and number 6 cup for the first pass and the second pass at 140 amps. Full pedal, wide open at 140 amps the whole way with a 1/8 ER309 filler. And that was just to get my hand back in it, sort of get the feel for it again. Kind of a fun thing to do is weld something like this in a positioner. So once that was done, I decided to chuck one up in a tripod vise and then go from 6 o'clock to 12. Now you don't always have to do this. A lot of times you would roll a joint like this in a tripod vise, but sometimes it might have a 8 or 10 foot offset and it's just not practical to flip it, and so it's just easier to get underneath it, go from bottom to top. And that's what I'm going to try to do today. I'm going to try to get some good arc shots here and go all the way from the bottom to the top, stop as few times as possible. And I can tell you, this is after the fact when I'm doing this editing job here. It does not quite feel the same as it felt in my 20s. But I was able to get under it and make something happen. Just felt kind of weird. The red hose that you see there draped over my wrist is a CK Worldwide Superflex hose. It's awesome. I highly recommend it. You can really feel the difference when you're walking the cup. You don't have that big heavy hose swinging around. So I was at 140 amps here too, and for this joint I used a 1/8 rod for the filler. Walked right over it, again with a number 6 gas lens cup. You can kind of see here that the electrode extension is roughly the same as the inside diameter of the cup. That's kind of a rule of thumb. Cup size matters too. I prefer to have a small enough cup that it'll wiggle nicely here and not just rock from corner to corner. But sometimes you only got what you got and you got to figure out how to make it work. That was a number 6 cup, and I'll use a number 6 cup for the first 2 passes and then go to a number 8 for the last. I'm using the lift arc setting today on the welder, so I've got no foot pedal to fool with, no amperage control. That means I'm also having to snap out of the puddle when I finish and then file it lightly and hit it with a wire brush. But that's typical for socket welds in the field. If you're doing socket welds like this in a pipe shop, on a turntable or something like that, it's a whole different story. You might very well have a foot pedal or some other type of control there. But for field work, it's common just to have scratch start, also known as a dry rig. I'm watching the toe of that weld up near the fitting edge. I'm trying not to scallop it or chop it off or anything. You can see the puddle's kind of wanting to do that. And now I'm getting close to 12 o'clock here, a little bit past 12 in fact. I pull the filler wire out of the puddle and kind of speed things up a little bit and then trail out, snap out real quick. And then I usually will hit that with a file lightly, wire brush, and then go right back over it later. Other side now. You can see I'm kind of gripping the torch a little bit different. That's a kind of a matter of personal preference a lot of times, and then also if stuff's in the way. If you're in the field and there's another run 6 inches from this or even closer sometimes, you might have to freehand. You might only be able to weld for 1/3 of it before you have to stop and reposition. Whatever it takes. I'm kind of choked up on the torch here, holding it up close to the neck. And if I was more comfortable with this, I'd probably be gripping it back further on the handle a little bit, but I'm not. I'm out of practice, so I'm choked up on it. But with an air-cooled torch, it usually gets pretty warm up in that area by the time you make a full revolution on something like this. Doing the same thing here. I'm trying to watch that edge of the weld and not chop off the corner. I want a nice clean corner there for the next pass so that I can just barely overlap that, kind of make it look as nice as I can, and there I snap out. I'm turning it down to 135 amps for the last pass, and I'm going to let it cool down for a good 5 minutes. so it doesn't get out of hand. And also said, heck with this squatting down and getting underneath this thing at 6 o'clock, so I'm doing the remainder of this thing in quarters. I'm trying to push a little filler rod in there so that it doesn't have that scalloped look up on the very corner of that fitting. But if I barely chop it, I can dress that up with a file. There's plenty of thickness there that won't harm anything, just to lightly hit that. But I don't want to chop it up. Now, like I said, I'm doing this in quarters now, so I'm going over to the other side, and I'm not going to show all four. I'm just going to show some arc shot from this side because they all look the same after this. This is the first socket weld that I've done in this position in a long time. I might have done one or two in the past 30 years, and before that I did them all the time. But I'm starting to feel a little bit better about it now, even after just doing this one. I think that 2 or 3 more, they just start looking better and better. I'm still trying not to leave a choppy looking area on the very edge of that socket weld fitting, but I can see it's going to need to just be lightly hit with a file to make it look smooth when I'm finished. 1/8 ER70S2 is what I'm using here, 135 amps. Okay, we snap out. Now I'm going to lightly dress it with a file on the toes of the weld and on that fitting where there's a little bit of a scallop mark on the very corner, but I'm not going to go crazy with the file. And then I'll hit it with a power brush to kind of smooth everything over while it's good and hot. So what about weld size? How do you know how much weld to put on a socket weld fitting like this? There are some stipulations in the codes and standards. Usually it's based on the wall thickness. In this case, the wall thickness on 2-inch Schedule 40, the nominal wall thickness is 0.154. Usually those codes and standards will give you a minimum weld size based on the wall thickness of the pipe. Then you've got inspectors that have their opinions and preferences. So here's the question, and I'm inviting you to leave your comments, your opinion below in the comments section. Is this weld big enough? Did I overkill it? Did I overweld it? Did it need the 3rd pass? Would it have been okay with 2 passes, do you think? What's been your experience?